Okay, so With Understanding Comes Calm, our mission is to empower parents to feel good about their children and themselves as parents, to understand what underlies the feelings and the behavior that these children, complicated but wonderful children, exhibit, so they can identify and use their strengths to reach their potential. I take parents through an in-person process, 3-meeting process, where we go through education of giftedness and what other exceptionality the child is experiencing. We do homemade strategies that we role play and we create for the family. And then we do advocacy training. The other part of our mission is really to educate the general public and professionals about the true meaning of giftedness and twice exceptionality. I do speaking and presentations, lunch and learns with professionals. I do a lot of writing. There's a blog on my website. I have a monthly newsletter that is all about events in the area, news about 2E families and 2E children. And if you're interested in subscribing to the newsletter, there's a pad at my table. You can go to my welcome page on my website, withunderstandingcomescalm.com, and sign up there. I am passionate about, I'm saying it for the third time I know, teaching about the true meaning of giftedness and twice exceptionality. When I found this film, 2E Twice Exceptional, I actually had the great honor of covering it for its debut at the Richmond International Film Festival. Tom Ropolewski, the producer, and I met, and I was thrilled because it's such an accessible way to teach a large group of people about this wonderful population. So here's the funny thing. My tagline: supporting parents of gifted and distractible children. People ask me about the word distractible, and to me that is the more understood term, because that stands for so many well-researched, documented conditions or learning disabilities, learning differences like ADHD, ADD, high-functioning autism, dysgraphia, dyslexia, anxiety, so many things that you are all familiar with: processing speed, working memory, executive functioning challenges. So once I say what that means, oh yeah, okay, but gifted. If we all went together on a field trip up to Seven Locks and asked a bunch of people, how would you describe gifted? Or maybe even if I asked everybody here, how would you describe gifted? I would hear words like smart, potential, talent, and you know what? You'd be right. But that's like this much of gifted. So if somebody says to you, I don't really like the term gifted because all kids have gifts, now you know to say yes, but this is the word giftedness, that's this much. When I teach about giftedness, I say that that is the frosting between the 3-layer cake of characteristics of giftedness. So what are those 3 characteristics? Asynchronous development, perfectionism, and intensity. Okay, what is asynchronous development? Asynchronous development is when you have a strength, or in giftedness, you can have more than one strength, because you can be gifted intellectually, but it can be math, it can be writing, it can be science, you can be gifted artistically, you can be gifted musically, you can be gifted athletically, you can be gifted interpersonally or charismatically. And you can have one or more of these gifts at the same time. But guess what? If you have some strength to this degree, nature loves balance. You're not going to have everything at that level, right? And very often it's social or emotional challenges that come with our gifted folks. And sometimes it's a learning disability or a learning difference, and that's where twice exceptionality comes in. So let's take for a moment the bell curve of intelligence, right? So the middle is norm. And if you go to the left, standard deviations away, nobody argues that those folks need support, right? Well, guess what? When you go standard deviations away to the right, and by the way, there is gifted, highly gifted, and profoundly gifted. I've been in sessions where I've heard that there are accommodations within a gifted classroom for the different levels of giftedness. And the higher you go, the more standard deviations away that you go, the more support that is needed. These folks need support just as much as they did on the left side. They're just on the other side. Standard deviations are the same. In fact, did you know, and if you're really paying attention to your popcorn and not me, now's the time to look up and pay attention, because this statistic is amazing. 14% of gifted children may be identified with a learning disability compared to 4% of the general public. I found that kind of astounding. The trick is that many twice exceptional kids are unidentified or misidentified. Their gift may mask their challenge may mask their gift. Depending on the combination of their strengths and their challenges, they may be better or worse at compensating for what's weak for them. Which is why some 2E kids fly under the radar, and some 2E kids are denied admission into giftedness programs. Okay, so we have one of our layers, asynchronous development. Second layer is perfectionism. Can perfectionism be a good thing? Absolutely. It can be a driving force. It can be an incentive to do your best work. But guess what? The other side of perfectionism can be anxiety. In the gifted population, we set standards so high for ourselves, and we know that everybody around us who looks at our giftedness label has expectations super duper high for us. And there comes a point where we realize we just might not be able to make those expectations. And we're worried that we're not going to be able to live up to what everybody says that we should live up to, or to the level that we think we should live up to. Maybe you've heard your child described as lazy. Maybe you've heard your child described as afraid to take risks, or a failure to launch, or unmotivated. When I hear clients say that this is how their child is described, or if they describe their child this way, I know to ask questions about perfectionism and anxiety. I have 2 blogs on this subject right now on my website. One is called Sometimes Good Enough is Good Enough, and the other one, hot off the press, was just published on Thursday, and if you subscribe to my newsletter, you got it. It's called Perspective, Perseverance, and Perfectionism, and it takes into account Carol Dweck's work with mindset and Angela Duckworth with grit. Okay, so we have asynchrony, we have perfectionism, and number 3 characteristic in our characteristic cake of giftedness is intensity, or what is known as overexcitability, or OE in giftedness parlance. This is a topic that is really fascinating, and I highly recommend Googling overexcitabilities, or OEs, when you go home. I could talk for hours. I promise I won't. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. These are folks who are affected by stimuli in the world in a much grander way than you would expect from the general population. It isn't always negative. It sounds like it, overexcitability is like there's too much, right? But sometimes it's a really great thing that you can tap into the world in this way. We refer to these folks as cable televisions walking around in a 4-channel world. I wish I made that up. So there are 5 areas of overexcitabilities that were identified by the psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski. Intellectual, emotional, imaginational, what he called sensual, but I call sensory, and psychomotor. So if you know somebody who needs to know why, but why, like they get stuck in the classroom, you want to get on with your lesson plan, but they need to know everything about this. Or somebody who's just, in my day, they would be reading encyclopedias, now they're Googling. Somebody who's just, you like that, huh? Maybe you know somebody. Somebody who loves to do math and can do math, but they have to understand why it works. These are folks experiencing intellectual overexcitability. If there's somebody who has remarkable empathy, this is somebody who sits in a room and can feel the feelings of other people. We might call them oversensitive. They make connections to people, places, and things. I remember a client telling me about her child who could not deal with her throwing out the couch, even though it was worn and old. She had a connection to this couch. She was experiencing emotional overexcitability. If you know somebody who gets lost in thought, who can just create worlds out of thin air, or write in such a very detailed way, or maybe they create Lego buildings or with toothpicks, something without using any directions that's very complicated. Those are imaginational OE people. Someone who's challenged by seams in their socks, or I swear this is why we don't have tags in our shirts anymore, but those people who transitioning from light to dark, recess time to classroom time, loud to quiet, people who are enjoying something from their five senses, like music, they get lost in music, or a special kind of a food or something. These are people who are experiencing sensory OE. And our last one, and I'm sure nobody here has experienced this, because these are the kids who seem to be running on a motor at 1 speed, supersonic. Nobody here knows this, right? That's your psychomotor OE kid. Can you imagine, now that you know all of this, can you imagine what our kids, our clients, our students are experiencing every day? They are trying to quiet the perfectionism monster in their head. They are trying to harness their overexcitabilities, which they have no control over, by the way. They are dealing with frustration over their own asynchrony. Why can I do some things really easily and other things not at all? No wonder they come home and fall apart, or they hit a wall in the classroom. But if we have this understanding of their inner lives, of their inner experience, hopefully we can respond to them in a proactive rather than reactive way. I tell parents and professionals all the time, these are the kids who are going to change the world. But the world is not set up for them. So our job is to help educate. It's to advocate for them. And above all, it's to celebrate their strengths so that their self-esteem rises and they can meet that boundless potential that we know they have. And with that being said, let's meet some awesome TUI kids in this film. Thank you.